Water's good enough for poor folks.
Alana, my daughter's future mother-in-law, said, laughing coarsely. I couldn't hide my discomfort at her vulgarity. Oh, could it be? Right after that, my daughter's sister-in-law-to-be, Raina, looked at me, her face turning pale. I just smiled slightly. I'm Sonia Rollins. Turning 54 this year. I divorced my ex-husband when our daughter, Krista, was 3. The reason for our divorce was irreconcilable differences. He wouldn't work and spent his days drinking. No matter what I said, he never changed. Naturally, our financial situation worsened. I didn't need a family like that, so I decided to divorce him. We divorced without any child support or alimony. Since then, it's been just Krista and me. I was a housewife until the divorce. When I had to raise Krista alone, I started working desperately. I couldn't leave young Krista alone at home, so I initially took on work-from-home jobs to make ends meet. Of course, life was tough. Working from morning till night, the pay was low, leading to constant saving. There were times, a day before payday, when I ran out of money and went without food. Despite the hardships, I managed to raise Krista into adulthood. With Krista becoming a working adult, I found myself with more free time and started dedicating more time to work. Leveraging my experience in simple tasks, I began creating handmade items. This eventually turned into a successful business. There's also been a change in my personal life. Krista got engaged. Not long after Krista started working at her company, she began dating a man named Nicholas. Nicholas is Krista's boss at work and is 5 years her senior. I've seen a photo of Nicholas that Krista showed me. He seemed like a fine young man. It appears Krista has learned from her father's bad example, as Nicholas gives off a serious impression. I'm delighted with the happiness Krista has found. Now, in the latter half of my life, I've decided to live as I please. That was my thought. Then, one day, Mom, I need to talk to you about something. Krista approached me after dinner. It was unusual for Krista to come to me hesitantly like this. While thinking this, I responded to Krista. What's the rush? You seem off. What's going on? Then Krista said to me, modestly, I'm going to marry Nicholas.
Really? That's wonderful. Congratulations.
Since I haven't actually met Nicholas, I don't know what kind of person he is. I hoped he would be just like the person in the photo.
I'm glad you feel that way, Mom. I was worried you might oppose it.
Krista seemed relieved that I didn't oppose her decision. Her face clearly showed relief. Then Krista made a suggestion. So, I was hoping you could meet Nicholas this weekend. It seems Krista wanted me to meet Nicholas before they got married. Considering how serious Krista is, she probably wanted to show me Nicholas's face to put me at ease. I nodded strongly towards Krista. All right. I'll meet Nicholas. I want to see what kind of person he is.
Mom,
Krista said, looking happy. And so, it was decided that Nicholas and I would meet. Sunday of the following weekend. I was waiting at home for Krista and him. It was just before 11 a.m. It wouldn't be long until Krista brought Nicholas over. Then, at that moment, the doorbell rang. Yes. When I opened the door, there stood Krista and Nicholas. Nice to meet you. I'm Nicholas Friedman, engaged to Krista. Nicholas said, greeting me. I felt a bit relieved by Nicholas's politeness. Krista is my precious only daughter. I'm glad her partner is a decent person. Please come in, I said, inviting Krista and Nicholas into the house. Nicholas still seemed like a fine young man after entering our home. He brought famous brand sweets as a gift. and he shared the story of how he and Krista met with a smile. "Nicholas, stop it. You're embarrassing me," Krista said, blushing, addressing Nicholas. Seeing Krista like this felt fresh to me. However, the warm atmosphere changed in the next moment. "By the way, is your father at work today?" Nicholas asked, looking around curiously. His expression was somewhat puzzled. I was taken aback by Nicholas's question. Glancing at Krista, she looked a bit pale. She probably hadn't told Nicholas about being raised by a single mother. Honestly, it was wrong of Krista to keep it a secret. In traditional households, single mothers often face prejudice. I braced myself to explain the situation to Nicholas. "Krista might not have mentioned it, but I'm divorced and a single mother." Nicholas's face, previously smiling, went blank for a moment. "What's wrong?" I asked Nicholas, feeling anxious. Maybe it wasn't good for me to have told him. That's what I thought. But in the next moment, Nicholas was already smiling. "It's nothing, please don't worry," he said, still smiling. "Is that so?" I said, tilting my head, puzzled. Despite being confused by Nicholas's change of expression, I didn't press further. After that, the marriage talks proceeded smoothly. Krista seemed to enjoy planning the wedding, asking,
"What kind of dress should I choose? What color do you think is good for me, Mom?"
with excitement.
"Well, maybe a color you like?"
I responded, but couldn't quite feel at ease. I couldn't forget Nicholas's expression from that moment. Nicholas's expression went blank. Perhaps his family has strict views on single parenthood. So, I asked Krista,
"What did Nicholas say on the way back that day? About us being a single mother household?"
Maybe Nicholas is facing opposition to marrying Krista from his parents. I asked, but Krista answered with a puzzled look. "He didn't say anything special?" "Mom, aren't you worrying too much?" Since Krista said that, I couldn't ask anymore. However, my bad feeling proved right. It happened one night. "Mom." As soon as Krista returned, she called out my name. Her expression was quite dark, and I asked her in surprise,
"Krista, why such a gloomy face? Did something happen?"
Even though I asked, Krista remained silent. It was unusual for the optimistic Krista to look so troubled. After a while, Krista hesitantly began to speak.
"Actually, it seems Nicholas's family isn't too pleased about our marriage,"
Krista said, looking sad.
"Why?"
"Because we're a single mother family. They think Nicholas will struggle because we're poor and from a single parent home." That's an awful thing to say. It would be very hard to hear such things from the in-laws. I asked Krista seriously,
"Did Nicholas's mother say that?"
Krista nodded silently. I was outraged by the turn of events. Just because we're a single mother family doesn't mean they should assume we're poor. We've had our struggles, but now we live a normal life. I work as hard as any man. And then Krista told me something unbelievable.
"Nicholas's sister also said some things."
"Like what?" I asked Krista.
"She said we're just after Nicholas's money. That it's impossible for them to accept us as family."
Krista answered, looking disheartened. Her face looked incredibly lonely. Krista must have been deeply hurt by these direct comments. It's terrible that they would say such things about me without even meeting me. I can't believe Nicholas's parents.
"What did Nicholas say at that time?"
I asked Krista. And I remembered Nicholas's expression when he came to our house the other day. Maybe his expressionless face was because he imagined his family's reaction. It seems his family has quite a prejudice against single mothers. I started to worry about the future. Then Krista said,
Nicholas defended me. After all, I work at the same company as Nicholas, so there's no way I'd ask for money. I felt relieved. If Nicholas is on your side, that's reassuring. I found myself saying that without thinking. If Nicholas had sided with his family instead of defending Krista, I would have been worried about her future. She would probably continue to face unpleasant remarks from his family. But if Nicholas is on her side, it felt somewhat better. A few days later, Krista suggested having a family meeting with Nicholas's family before the wedding. Mom, I want to have a family meeting with Nicholas's family before the wedding. I'm really sorry. According to Krista, it was Alana's suggestion. You should greet your fiancé's parents at least once. Your mother has that much common sense, right? She was told. Nicholas and I couldn't exactly refuse. I'm really sorry, Krista said, apologizing and being considerate of me. For Krista's marriage introduction, we are meeting with his family. Honestly, I have no idea what they might say. I don't really want to go, but it seems right to follow through with the courtesy. It's okay, I responded with my agreement. Then, the day of the marriage introduction arrived. Krista and I went to a restaurant near his parents' house. The reason for a restaurant, as Krista told me, was because Alana had said, "We can't have you in our house when you're not married yet. There's a fine dining restaurant nearby, that will do, won't it?" The restaurant Alana chose charges $300 per person for a course meal. I go there occasionally for business, but hardly ever privately. I was puzzled by Alana's choice of restaurant. It seems Alana had also chosen a cafe near their house for Krista's first greeting to the family. Moreover, Krista ended up paying for Alana's meal as well. According to Alana, it's only natural since you're becoming my son's wife. Apparently, Nicholas reimbursed the meal cost later. Why does Alana act so arrogantly, even though she's the one inviting us for the marriage greeting? I couldn't help but feel uncomfortable. But if I, as Krista's mother, refuse now, Krista will surely be criticized for being rude. After getting married, Krista might end up feeling uncomfortable. So, reluctantly, I accepted the proposal. Then, I put on light makeup and headed to the designated place. I usually wear full makeup for work, but I thought it best to keep it understated today. My outfit was also much more modest than usual. A flashy outfit might give them the impression that I'm extravagant. Given that we're already being accused of being after Nicholas's money, a modest outfit seemed wise. With these thoughts, Krista and I entered the upscale restaurant and were led by the staff to a private room. Upon opening the door, Nicholas and his family were there. Krista, Sonia, thank you for coming today. Nicholas greeted us politely. Thank you as well for today. I also expressed my gratitude to Nicholas. Then I faced father-in-law Kevin, mother-in-law Lana, and sister-in-law Raina. His parents and Raina smirked unpleasantly and looked down on Krista and me. It was clear at a glance that we were not welcomed by his family. I greeted them with heightened wariness. Thank you for giving us your precious time today. I'm Sonia, Krista's mother. It's a pleasure to meet you. Then Alana said with a nasty smile. I'd rather not have any further association, you know. Mom! Nicholas admonished Alana, but she didn't seem to care. Just being from a single-parent family is problematic enough. You must be struggling with money. Even your clothes are so plain. Alana scrutinized my outfit from top to bottom and said. Then she laughed mockingly. My attempt to dress modestly had backfired. Raina also hurled insults while laughing. You could have married someone decent. Poor Nicholas, stuck with a poor mother and daughter. I was irritated by Raina's comment. Such remarks were too rude for a first meeting. But I couldn't disrupt Krista's marriage.
Excuse me.
I reluctantly took my seat. Perhaps because I didn't retort. The in-laws looked at me as if they found me amusing. Krista looked at me with concern. Nicholas seemed a bit angry at his family's lack of manners. His brows were furrowed. Unaware of his demeanor, Alana was in high spirits. Today, we've reserved a course meal. It's $300. Alana excitedly told Reina. Really? I'm looking forward to it because the courses here are so expensive. We have to eat a lot. Reina was giddy with excitement. Kevin nodded happily as well. After a while, the staff brought the dishes. It was a colorful array of amuse-bouche. At this restaurant, 3 types of amuse-bouche are served on one plate. They all looked very delicious. But in front of me, there was only water. I was about to call the staff back, but they had already left the room. Only the water was left in front of me, a stark reminder. Nicholas looked at the scene, dumbfounded. Reina, knowing what was happening, laughed mockingly. Krista noticed it too and said with concern, "Mom." Then, in the next moment, Alana laughed nastily. "Poor people are fine with just water," Alana said, laughing crudely. I showed my discomfort at her vulgarity. "What does this mean?" I asked Alana. The in-laws had called us to this restaurant. Yet, they had no intention of hosting us properly. I was quite irritated inside. Alana glanced at me, then laughed as if she was pleased. Even though I was angry, she didn't seem to care. She seemed to enjoy it, actually. "Oh? Not only are you a poor single mother, but are you also stupid? Did you really think someone worthless like you would be welcomed?" Alana hurled insults at me. Kevin nodded as if it was to be expected. "Don't you feel ashamed to be a single parent? A woman who was left by her husband, you're full of flaws. A plain woman like you becomes unnecessary, right?" Kevin said, laughing crudely. It wasn't that my ex-husband left me, but Kevin's assumption was unilateral. I truly thought this was unbelievable as a human being. Reina also laughed joyfully. "I don't want to end up like Krista's mother. Working for low wages even though she's a woman. It's really pitiful without any feminine charm." While saying this, she looked down on me. "Mom, I'm sorry." Krista looked like she was about to cry. She must feel responsible for putting me in this difficult situation. Krista was looking down. I had reached my limit of patience. Being looked down upon like this, I couldn't stay quiet any longer. It might be time to fight back. At that moment, "Enough already! All of you ganging up on Krista's mother. Aren't you ashamed as adults?" Nicholas yelled loudly. I was surprised that Nicholas stood up for me.
Nicholas.
Krista also looked surprised. Nicholas was red-faced and angry at his family. However, Alana and the others showed no remorse. Alana, still laughing joyfully, said, "There's no need to defend poor people. Why is Nicholas getting so angry?" Kevin nodded significantly. Nicholas's words seemed to have no effect on them. I could only be dumbfounded by his parents. They must lack common sense. It might be time for a counterattack. I had a last resort that would surprise the in-laws. At that moment, Reina started to look at my face. I ended up glaring at Reina. Then Reina muttered,
"Oh, could it be?"
Right after that, Reina looked at me and her face turned pale. It seems she finally realized who I really am. I let out a slight smile. Reina, looking at me, was trembling.
"No way."
Noticing her reaction, Kevin asked Reina with a puzzled look, What's wrong with you? You've been acting strange for a while.
Alana also looked at Reina, surprised.
You're as pale as a ghost. Are you feeling okay?
Alana spoke to Reina with concern. Still, Reina's trembling didn't stop. Given the truth Reina realized, it's understandable. Then Reina asked Kevin.
Dad, your company is Globe Crafts, right?
Reina looked at Kevin, seeking confirmation. Globe Crafts is a small to medium-sized enterprise with about 100 employees. The salaries aren't comparable to those of major companies. And I am familiar with Globe Crafts. The reason I know it is because it's related to my work. Kevin said with a laugh.
What's this all of a sudden? I might look like this, but I'm working hard as the sales manager.
And Kevin continued.
I used my connections to hire you as a part-time worker in our company, didn't I? Be grateful.
Kevin said, laughing.
That's right.
Reina's face fell, looking resigned. Kevin asked Reina, puzzled.
But why are you asking this? Are you trying to show off because this poor person is likely employed on a non-regular basis, and you work as a regular employee?
Kevin looked down on me with a disdainful gaze. This man is about to face a dire situation. I vowed in my heart. Then Reina sighed lightly and began to speak.
Dad, don't you know the company's clients?
The company's clients? Kevin asked, puzzled. Alana looked stunned. Being a housewife, she didn't seem to understand much. Reina hesitantly explained.
I've met Krista's mother before. Inside the company. She was wearing more makeup then, and I didn't recognize her right away.
Kevin seemed confused.
What do you mean inside the company? I'm sure I remember the faces of the employees, including part-timers, but there's no older woman like that?
I frowned at being called an older woman. But it seems Kevin was too preoccupied to notice. Trying desperately to remember as he heard inside the company. However, I haven't spoken directly to Kevin, so it's understandable if he doesn't remember. As I thought this, Reina began to apologize.
Krista's mother! I'm really sorry for what happened.
Seeing Reina's behavior, the in-laws began to get agitated.
Why apologize? There's no need to say sorry to such a poor person.
Alana said.
That's right! Don't you have any pride? Apologizing to a poor person like this.
Kevin shouted at Reina. Reina glared sharply at her parents.
Dad, Mom, Krista's mother is actually very wealthy. Much more than Dad could ever be.
What did you say? Kevin glared at Reina. Being told such a thing by his own daughter must have been unexpected. Alana, too, reacted to Reina's statement with,
How could you say that?
Screaming almost hysterically. Reina said with a resigned attitude.
Because Krista's mother is the president. I've served her tea in the company's reception room. You know Roland's Bags, right?
Kevin froze upon hearing that name. Then he turned his neck to look at me. I deliberately smiled. Kevin's face turned pale.
Roland's Bags. Isn't that the brand the president finally convinced for a collaboration that's supposed to happen?
Then Alana screamed.
Roland's Bags, that's the one with bags in department stores, right? Even my bag is from there.
Alana said, looking over her bag multiple times. When we entered this restaurant's private room, I noticed a familiar bag. Alana was holding it carefully under her chair. It's a breach of manners in a high-end restaurant, but it must be her favorite bag. I told Alana with a smile. That's a magazine giveaway, isn't it? I'm honored that you're using my brand. Alana's face turned red.
Then she looked down, embarrassed. She must feel ashamed that her bag was recognized as a magazine giveaway. I took out my business card from my card holder. I am Sonia Rollins, the representative of Rollins Bags. The in-laws scrutinized the business card carefully.
To think you were actually the president.
Kevin was trembling as he looked at the business card. Alana looked incredulous. I watched the two staring silently at the business card and said, "We were supposed to collaborate with Globe Crafts, but it seems like that collaboration won't be possible anymore. Such a shame." Hearing this, Kevin looked disturbed.
Why? That collaboration is the most important project the president has been working on. If we cancel it, our company will,
Kevin said, trembling with fear. "What's going on?" Alana asked Kevin, confused. The truth is, Globe Crafts is in a precarious financial situation. Compared to the past, fewer people are making handmade items. When I was young, my mother used to sew everything by hand. But now, cheap ready-made products are abundant, probably a sign of the times. Globe Crafts has been hit hard by this trend, with sales declining year by year. When Globe Crafts' president proposed the collaboration, he mentioned it was a strategy to turn around the company's dire situation. However, I have collaborated with many famous brands. So, honestly, I wasn't very interested in collaborating with a small to medium-sized enterprise like Globe Crafts. Initially, I declined the president's proposal, but eventually, I was persuaded by his enthusiasm and agreed. We decided to collaborate with Globe Crafts to make bags. But now, that's a thing of the past. Kevin was trembling. He must be terrified of what's to come. Ignoring Kevin, I quietly said, "The collaboration with Globe Crafts didn't seem to offer much benefit. I was just moved by the president's enthusiasm. But a company that looks down on Krista." I stared at Kevin with a cold gaze. Kevin was sweating under my stare. Then, in the next moment, he apologized to me. "What?" While Alana was confused by Kevin's apology, he desperately sought my forgiveness. Krista and Nicholas were also surprised by Kevin's apology.
"I'm truly sorry."
Kevin is apologizing, clearly not caring about how it looks. To me, Kevin's apology doesn't resonate at all. After all, an apology that comes only after he realizes my position is just to protect himself. There's no genuine remorse there. I spoke with a chillingly cold voice. "An apology now? After you've looked down on Krista and me all this time? To think that an apology would suffice after all this." Kevin's mindset must be overly optimistic. Then, realizing that his apology wouldn't turn the situation around, Kevin quickly stood up. It was merely a performance after all. Alana, looking bewildered at me, said, "We're going to be family, so you'll forgive us, right?" She said that flippantly, looking at me. Then Alana continued, "I'm a big fan of Rollins Bags. Since we're family, I'll get some products for free, right?" Alana looked at me with hopeful eyes. I was so appalled that I couldn't say anything. "Mom, that's too convenient," Nicholas said, frowning and sternly admonishing her. Even for Alana, that comment was too far beyond the pale. But Alana, seemingly not understanding, said,
"Why not? There must be plenty of stock, right? It wouldn't hurt to give away a few."
Getting into a worse mood, Kevin and Raina looked at Alana with dismay. I told Alana, "Our products are not free to give away. After all, you are strangers to us." Alana looked frustrated at my words. "Krista and our Nicholas are getting married, right? So we are family. A family should provide financial support. You're the president after all. Alana said this with a straight face. After all the disdainful poor-calling, this was her attitude. She clearly had no remorse. Nicholas finally lost his patience with Alana's attitude. Mom, you change your attitude just because you found out Krista's mom is the president? Aren't you ashamed? Nicholas, his face red, reproached Alana. But Alana, unfazed, laughed it off. It doesn't matter. A president must have more money than they know what to do with, right? Share a little with us. I quietly told Alana. Even if Krista and Nicholas get married, I have no intention of forming any ties with you. Alana, surprised, tried to cozy up to me. Don't say that. Once Nicholas gets married, we'll be family anyway, so giving away a bag or two. Alana was infuriating. As I was about to retort, Nicholas stepped between Alana and me. Nicholas. When I asked, Nicholas looked troubled. I knew Sonia was the president. And I kept silent, knowing my parents would bother Sonia if they found out. Kevin looked regretful at Nicholas's confession. You knew? If you had told me, I would have. If you had known, you'd act just like Mom, right? Nicholas looked at Kevin with a cold gaze. How dare you speak to your parents like that? Keep this up, and you're disowned. Kevin shouted at Nicholas. Krista was puzzled by their exchange. Nicholas sighed and declared, I'm fine with being disowned. I'll sever ties with you all. Why would you say such a thing? After all we've done to raise you. Alana, shaken, spoke to Nicholas. Kevin and Raina, stunned, stared at Nicholas. They hadn't expected him to say he'd cut ties. I want to cherish Krista going forward. I don't need a family that disregards Krista and Sonia. Nicholas! Alana collapsed in tears. Kevin and Raina stood there, dumbfounded. Being disowned by their beloved son must be incredibly hard. But that's solely the responsibility of Alana and the rest of the in-laws. Live with your regrets. I'm sure you'll struggle in the future. I said, smiling lightly. Then Krista joined in with my statement. We won't even tell you if we have children. She said this directly to her in-laws. Not being able to see the grandchild. Please, spare us that. Alana cried out in agony. Amidst this, Nicholas murmured, We're done being a family. At his words, Kevin and Raina tried to cling to us with faces about to cry. Ignoring such in-laws, Krista, Nicholas, and I left the restaurant. Afterward, I heard Kevin and Raina were fired from the company. The day after the incident at the restaurant, I told the president of Globecrafts that I wanted to cancel the collaboration. The president tried to persuade me several times, but I refused. I cannot collaborate with a company that harbors individuals capable of such disdain. While I sympathized with the president's desire to save his company, I couldn't support a company that employed Kevin and his ilk. I explained the situation to the president. Then the president became furious. Apparently, the president has a daughter about Krista's age and couldn't forgive Kevin and Raina's actions. The collaboration with me was crucial for Globecrafts. Kevin and Raina had ruined such an important collaboration. It's understandable that the president couldn't forgive them. Kevin was already of age, and Raina was employed part-time through Kevin's connections. After being fired from Globecrafts, finding a new job would be very tough for them. And Alana was a housewife. She had already been cut off by Nicholas, their only breadwinner. Once, the in-laws came directly to our company to negotiate. Please collaborate with Globecrafts. If you do, the president will rehire me. Even if not a collaboration, provide financial support. Our family is suffering, you know? Families help each other out. They both pleaded desperately. After treating people like poor people and now suddenly claiming family, it's laughable. I made it clear. Neither collaboration nor financial support is possible. Nicholas has also severed ties with you, hasn't he? Please leave now. But the in-laws wouldn't leave. But... trying somehow to cling to me. I firmly told the in-laws again. Never appear in front of me again. If I see you again, I'll call the police. Perhaps because I mentioned the police, Kevin said. Please, not the police. We won't come again. And left with Alana. The in-laws' clothes were dirty. They probably weren't living well. They who had once scorned others as poor. It's purely their own fault. Apparently, Raina has since lived almost entirely shut-in. Struggling to find a job and unlikely to marry. Despairing about the future, Raina barely leaves her room. Her future seems to hold nothing but despair. 3 years have passed since then. Now, Krista, Nicholas, and I live together. Ideally, as newlyweds, Krista and Nicholas should live alone. But Nicholas said, I think it's safer for Krista if she's with you in case of anything. And they decided to live with me. Nicholas, busy with work, often helps with household chores alongside Krista. I'm truly grateful. And a significant change has occurred for the three of us. One day, Krista approached me with a serious look. Mom. Worried something might have happened to Krista, I became anxious. Then, in the next moment, she smiled. It looks like I'm going to be a mom. Krista joyfully stroked her belly. That's wonderful, Krista. Congratulations. Delighted, I hugged Krista. Nicholas smiled happily beside Krista and me. I'm sure various things will happen from now on. But if it's us, we can surely overcome them. I'm also looking forward to meeting the new grandchild. Imagining our happy future, a natural smile spread across my face.
Living expenses? What do you mean by that? I've never received anything like that before. My mother-in-law looked genuinely baffled. Hey, what's going on? Brian, explain it properly. My husband, who was shrinking before us, was cornered by both myself and my mother-in-law. My name is Carol. I'm a 37-year-old office worker. I live with my husband, Brian, and my mother-in-law. Brian and I met through a mutual friend and quickly hit it off. We were married within 4 months of meeting each other. Since we were both over 35, our parents and in-laws were overjoyed. Our relationship was also great. Since our first visit for marriage introductions, my mother-in-law and I had gone out for meals several times and had become close. Initially, we lived separately but close by. However, after my father-in-law passed away, we moved in together. Despite what people say, there was no mother-in-law bullying and our life was going smoothly. My mother-in-law would do the housework instead of me. I felt guilty, but as often as I got home late, I depended on her. It might sound odd, but I was grateful and had been giving her some living expenses and a small token of appreciation through my husband. However, that didn't mean I could leave everything to her. But since she always said it was fine, I had been relying on her. Since my husband's food consumption has increased recently, I have become a bit worried about whether the amount of money I provide for our daily expenses will be sufficient. So I decided to discuss this with my husband first. Hey, about the living expenses we're giving to your mom, you've been eating a lot lately and she's been doing all the cooking and cleaning, right? I'm thinking we should increase it a bit. What do you think? Huh? It should be fine, right? She's probably happy that her son and daughter-in-law are living with her and she hasn't said anything about it being insufficient. Don't you think we need to show our appreciation? Not just in words, but in a tangible way. So I'll give a little more next month. Could you pass it on to your mom? At my suggestion, my husband nodded with a happy smile. Really? That's great. I was actually thinking the same thing. Thanks. I thought he was being a little too optimistic, but this wasn't the first time, so I decided not to worry about it. I decided to give a bit more. Then, a little while later, I had a severe accident. I collided with a bike at an intersection. I fractured a bone and had to be hospitalized for 2 weeks. My husband brought me my stuff on the first day. Hey, are you okay? It looks painful. I'll let my mom know. That would be great, thanks. Since it's a shared room, I can't make a call. Could you tell her that I'll contact her once I'm able to move? My husband cheerfully responded, Sure, I got it, and went home. I was a bit worried, but I told myself that's how he always is. But then a week passed. Despite waiting, my husband never came. Not even my mother-in-law. Even if my husband was busy with work, it was unthinkable that my overprotective mother-in-law wouldn't come to visit me when I'm not feeling well. I moved to the lounge room with crutches. There was no contact on my cell phone either. I called my husband first, but he didn't answer. Well, he's probably at work, I thought. And then I called my mother-in-law. My mother-in-law picked up on the third ring. Oh, Carol, you sound beat. What's up? Hi, mother-in-law. You must have heard from Brian, but I'll be in the hospital for another week. So I'm sorry, but I'll need some fresh clothes. What? Hospitalized? What happened? An injury? Illness? I could tell from the other end of the call that my mother-in-law was flustered. My mind was filled with question marks. There was no sign that my mother-in-law was lying. Could it be that Brian forgot to tell his mother? But if that was the case, she would have noticed my absence and called me immediately. Anyway, my mother-in-law quickly said she'd visit and hung up. And 30 minutes later, she appeared in front of me, drenched in sweat. The hospital is about 40 minutes from home by train and foot. She must have hurried over. Thank you for coming, mother-in-law. What did you hear from Brian? You were going on a business trip for 2 weeks. He told me it was sudden, so he asked me to pass it on. Yes, Brian is also on a business trip. At that statement, a possibility dawned on me. My husband might be cheating on me. Why? Because Brian is an illustrator, so he can work from anywhere. But according to him, the home environment is the best for work, and unless something significant comes up, he doesn't go out. Even if there are occasional local meetings, I know that the company doesn't arrange for a meeting that requires a business trip. How do I know? The answer is simple. Because I work in the same company as an administrative staff member. What's wrong? You look pale. Are you feeling unwell? Mother-in-law, our company wouldn't send Brian on a business trip. That's the job of the sales team. I'm in admin, so I don't go on business trips either. At my words, my mother-in-law tilted her head. I wished I could have been as naive. In other words, Brian lied. There's been no notification of his absence for a week, so I guess he's still working. I wonder where he really is. He left his injured wife in the hospital and lied to me. Did Brian tell you where he was going on business? Now that you mention it, he said he was staying in a hotel in Miami, that the company had arranged it. Oh yes, here it is. My mother-in-law showed me the hotel's website she found on her smartphone. It was a hotel we had stayed at during a previous vacation. It was where we stayed for our wedding anniversary. Of course, it was more expensive than other places, not a place where a company would cover the accommodation cost. I felt a headache coming on from such a sloppy alibi. Mother-in-law, this is hard to say, but Brian might be cheating. What? Brian? But this situation does seem suspicious. Oh, isn't this the hotel? Hold on a moment. Let's confirm if he's really there, my mother-in-law said and called somewhere. After a while, she hung up with a smirk on her face. They said they'll check it out for me. First, we need to verify the facts. Turns out that the hotel is run by my mother-in-law's relative. She told Brian about it before, but he either forgot or didn't care. About 10 minutes passed when I got a call from my mother-in-law. The results were damning. My husband, Brian, seemed to be staying overnight at that hotel, and with a woman no less. Although it was not allowed, the situation was special, and my mother-in-law told me the name which Brian was with. I was shocked to hear the name. I know her, actually. She's a friend of mine. Mother-in-law was equally surprised by this revelation. Turns out the other woman was my coworker and friend, Jessica. Jessica works in the same department as Brian. She was even the one who introduced me to him. She had attended our wedding, even giving a speech. Mother-in-law was furious, her face turning bright red. I had to hurriedly stop her from calling Brian. Let's gather solid evidence first. Hire a private detective. After that, I'm going to file for divorce. I can't accept a man who cheats with my friend. I plan to seek alimony, so I'm sorry for the trouble this will cause you, mother-in-law. Don't worry about it. I'll give that idiot son of mine a piece of my mind. How dare he betray such a good wife? When he comes back, he'll get a thrashing. I felt a bit uplifted by mother-in-law's words and started looking for a private detective. A relative of mother-in-law recommended a detective agency, and I decided to hire them. After reading the report they provided, I couldn't help but laugh. Turns out my friend, Jessica, was pretending to be the wife of my husband while they were on location. 3 days before my scheduled discharge from the hospital, I called Brian. I kept it a secret that mother-in-law knew about me. How are you feeling? I'm sorry I've been too busy to visit. I'll definitely pick you up on your discharge day. Do you need anything? No, I'm fine. Sorry for being a bother while you're so busy. Apparently my recovery is taking longer, so my discharge date has been extended. I'm just calling to let you know. I'm borrowing things like pajamas from the hospital, so no need to worry. Looks like I'll be discharged a week from now. Sorry for not being able to support you while you're so busy. Oh, could you withdraw money for the hospital bills? I don't have any cash on hand, so could you do it on my discharge day? I see. That sounds tough. All right, I should be done with my delivery in a week, so I'll go to the bank before picking you up. My mom's been worried too. She's caught a cold and feels bad for not being able to visit you. Brian nonchalantly lying through his teeth. Knowing it was all lies, I had to restrain myself from laughing. Oh, is that so? Please tell mother-in-law to take care. Did you manage to inform the office? Thank you. Did they say anything about allowances? Eh? Oh, they did. I'll take care of the procedures. You just rest and recover. Hope you get well soon. All right, thank you. See you in a week then. I already knew what Brian had told the office about me. I had confirmed it with the office before Brian's call. Brian apparently told the office that he was going on a trip and applied for my leave. So my boss asked right off the bat, "How was the trip? Are you getting good rest?" After I explained my situation, my boss decided to visit the hospital immediately. Not only my boss, but also the HR department came to the hospital. And it turns out I'm entitled to sick leave benefits. I found out that my husband, Brian, has been out of touch for about a week, and he's also running late on his deadlines. The same seems to be true for his mistress. They can't seem to get in touch with her either. It turns out that something like this has been going on for the past 6 months, and it's finally come to a head, so they came to talk to me. I told my bosses that I wanted them not to mention this to Brian or his mistress until a week later, and after that they can impose any punishment they see fit. As planned, I was discharged from the hospital. It seems that Brian had submitted another application for my paid leave, and his mother, my mother-in-law, got a call from him saying that his business trip was extended. Despite my hospital stay being extended because I'm not feeling well, he's extending his vacation with his mistress. It's clear there's no love left for me. I felt a bit sad. I decided to take my paid leave as planned. My boss told me to take as much time as I needed. For a week until Brian returned, my mother-in-law and I prepared to give him a piece of our minds. The day before I was supposed to tell Brian about my discharge from the hospital, I called him. "Hello, how is your mother doing?" "I'm feeling good and I got discharged today. It was sudden, so don't worry about picking me up. I can pay with my credit card." "You're working today, right, Brian?" "Don't worry about me." "What? Really?" "Got it. I have a meeting soon and another one tonight, so I won't be home until late. Sorry." "That's fine. Don't worry about it. I'll take a taxi home." I barely held back a laugh at the sound of the shopping center announcement in the background of Brian's call, and responded. Then I calmly hung up the phone and pressed the button on the voice recorder. I had already heard from the detective that Brian was planning to go shopping today, so I intentionally called him at that time. When I checked the voice recorder, Brian's voice and the announcement were both clearly recorded. Brian had apparently contacted my mother-in-law, telling her that he was actually on vacation with a friend. He claimed it was a working vacation of sorts, so it wasn't exactly a lie. Andy said that he had gotten my approval and that I had told him not to tell her about my hospitalizations so as not to worry my mother-in-law. I couldn't help but laugh at Brian's absurd excuses. The detective informed me that Brian had boarded a late-night flight back. My mother-in-law and I laid out all the documents on the table and waited for Brian to return. However, Brian called me and said this. "Sorry, the meeting ran late and I missed the last train. I'll be back on the first train tomorrow." "Is that so? That's tough." "Got it. Sorry I can't pick you up." I responded like that and hung up the phone. After enjoying a 3-week affair trip, it seems he still can't get enough. My mother-in-law was furious, but I found that my love for Brian had completely disappeared, and I was able to remain calm for the discussion. Then, the next day, looking exhausted, Brian came home loaded with souvenirs. "You went on a trip? I didn't hear about that." "Huh? Didn't I tell you? Sorry, my bad. I got friendly with a client and they invited me. Business relationships matter, right?" my husband said nonchalantly as I took a bag from him and led him to the living room. "I'm home. Hey, what's up with you, Mom? You look scary," Brian said, plopping down onto a chair with a grin on his face. He seemed to believe that his mother was on his side, but as soon as he saw the documents laid out on the table, his face went pale. I sat next to my mother-in-law and pointed at a photo. "Oh yes, you seem to have had quite the fun. Your trip with Jessica. Leaving your injured wife for 3 weeks. Were you in a honeymoon mood?" I asked. What's this? Carol, stop fooling around." Brian stammered at me, his face contorting. "Unfortunately, this is no joke. I have evidence from a private detective. You were pretty careless, weren't you? Your dinner conversations were totally bugged. Staying at a hotel run by our relatives, you must have thought you wouldn't get caught." At this, Brian's face turned even more shocked. He looked at his mother for help. "Mom, it was a lapse in judgment, so I..." "A lapse in judgment that lasted 3 weeks seems a bit too long, don't you think?" His mother cut him off with a cheerful smile. Brian, who had been hoping for help, was stunned. "Here, these are documents for a claim for damages and a divorce application. Fill it out now." "Damages? Divorce? Carol, I'm sorry, I didn't mean it. The one I truly love is you. Can't you forgive me? Let's start over." In response, I pressed a button on my phone. Out flowed the voices of Brian and Jessica. It was a conversation recorded by the detective, hinting at a divorce with me and a remarriage with Jessica. Brian's face turned even bluer. "It was just a spur-of-the-moment thing. I didn't mean it." I couldn't care less, really," I said, handing him the documents and urging him to write. "Please, forgive me. I can't afford to pay any damages." "Well, that's what happens when you splurge like that. Where did all that money come from anyway? Brian mumbled something incoherent. I had a bad feeling about it. You didn't by chance use the living expenses I had been giving you to give to mother-in-law, did you? You have been passing it on to her, right? The person who reacted to my words was not Brian, but mother-in-law. Living expenses? What are you talking about? I've never received anything like that, mother-in-law said, seemingly genuinely unaware. Hey, what's going on here? Brian, explain it properly. Mother-in-law and I cornered Brian, who had shrunk considerably. I'm sorry, the living expenses. I used them for our dates. I felt my already icy affection for Brian grow even colder. He said he had spent the almost $2,000 I had been giving him every month. All of it. I told you that money was for groceries, utilities, and to thank mother-in-law. That money was mine in the first place. I'm sorry, my salary alone wasn't enough. It was clear what wasn't enough. The designer items Jessica had. Surely they must have been gifts from Brian. I swiftly raised my hand, but it was stopped by my mother-in-law. Brian, with hopeful eyes, watched as mother-in-law stopped me. He still seemed to think mother-in-law is on his side. You can't, Carol. If you lay a hand, it'll be your disadvantage, mother-in-law said, turning around to face Brian, then sharply slapped his cheek. To the stunned Brian, mother-in-law spoke calmly and monotonously. I've always thought the sillier the child, the cuter. I've spoiled you too much. Even with the bias, you grew up kind and your father and I were so happy when you got such a good wife, but now I'm cutting ties with you. But Mom, you're joking, right? Mother-in-law slapped away Brian's pleading hand and handed him a document. It contained a clause renouncing inheritance. Brian widened his eyes and muttered, I can't believe it. It doesn't matter if you can't believe it. It's all true. At mother-in-law's firm stance, Brian hung his head and signed. Make sure you write this too. I'll be claiming from Jessica as well. I'll add on the amount she spent. Oh yes, the company knows everything. Brian, completely dejected and seemingly out of arguments, signed all the documents I presented. Afterward, mother-in-law kicked Brian out. He had apparently been misusing company entertainment expenses and was claimed for reimbursement from the company. Brian is said to be living in an apartment without a bath, forced into a poor lifestyle with what's left after paying alimony and reimbursement. Claimed alimony from his mistress, Jessica. Turns out Jessica was married and her husband was away on business, so I contacted her husband through social media and claimed alimony. As a result, Jessica avoided divorce but had to quit her job. She was forced to live with her husband's family. They live in a rural area without internet connection, and she's said to be forced to work from dawn till dusk. I ended up being adopted by mother-in-law. Having lost my parents early, I decided to take care of mother-in-law till the end. Mother-in-law was initially reluctant because of Brian's infidelity. However, in the end, she accepted, and we sold the house, bought a new house for just the two of us. I want to take good care of mother-in-law.